Ask any teacher, marketer, politician, journalist, or photographer. The story is everything. But stories are just experiences that happen to have happened, unless, of course, Spielberg produces one and it gets an Oscar. But when you collect stories over time, something amazing happens. They can expand a child's imagination in a way that can shape his or her perspective. That's why kids need stories. They actually need a variety of stories. For example, kids need family stories over time. Without personal and family stories, kids miss out on having the kind of relational history that fuels a healthy perspective about their identity. Kids also need cultural stories over time. Cultural stories help stimulate a kid's imagination. They shape their understanding of a bigger world. Without these kinds of stories, kids could miss part of their cultural history, the part that they need to develop values and empathy for the people around them. You know what else kids need? Kids need Bible stories over time. We decided to put this at the bottom of our list for a reason, not because it's less important, but actually because it's more important. You see, the Bible isn't a book. It's actually a library of 66 books written by 40 different authors over about 1,600 years. And they were all very different people, ranging from nomads to kings, from priests to fishermen. Yet all of the stories in the Bible connect to tell one story about God and His love for us over time. Without the Bible, kids and teenagers could grow up and fail to connect the great mysteries of the universe with a creative and loving God. They would actually miss out on the kind of spiritual history that is foundational to faith. That's why stories over time matter. They provide kids with a relational, cultural, and spiritual context to shape their perspectives about God, about faith, about values, and even about life. Let me say it again this way. Stories over time expand a child's imagination in a way that can shape his or her perspective. So what does that have to do with you? I mean, if you're a leader and a parent, basically we want you to understand that your role is to reimagine yourself as a story collector or a storyteller. You are producers, librarians, maybe even photojournalists. You should always be looking, for the sake of kids and teenagers, for the next story. That's the way you'll help kids have a richer history. By the way, stories are just another one of God's brilliant ideas. If God created time as a platform to prove He loves us unconditionally, then maybe He designed stories so that collectively over time they could give us a deeper perspective about His universal principles and truths. To put it another way, God actually fashioned the human brain so that it would connect to story. Then He crafted an original script that would continue to fascinate humans. And then He designed humans with the creative talent to craft intriguing stories. In fact, it's like our minds are hardwired to engage in the way information fits together in the context of a narrative. One specialist in this area puts it this way. In the last 15 years, we have developed the brain imaging technologies that help us shed light on what it means to get lost in a good story. Studies are suggesting that when reading, listening, or watching a good story, we activate brain regions used to process the experience as if it were our own. In other words, we are wired for stories. Think about it this way. If you ever need a little more proof that God exists, consider the magical, mystical, imaginative, compelling way kids, teenagers, and everyone else for that matter connect to stories. I mean, it seems obvious. God created your imagination, then God invented stories to ignite it. So don't underestimate the potential of your God-given imagination. I mean, have you ever considered that without your imagination, you can't see past what you already know? You can't care how someone else feels? And you can't hope beyond your present situation. J.K. Rowling says some very interesting things about humans and imagination. She suggests that we are the only species that can think ourselves into other people's places. That's what the gift of imagination and story does for a child or teenager. It enables them, literally, to think their way into other people's lives. It compels them to feel the sentiments of other people's emotions. It invites them to venture into other people's places. That's why the real stories you tell kids can move them emotionally and spiritually to see life from a bigger perspective. And that's why one of the most powerful things we can do is to teach kids the true stories, or should we say, the history of the Bible, so they can see it as something real and tangible, so they can connect God's story to to their own personal story. You see, that's how it becomes part of their heritage and shapes their view of life. But here's another interesting thought related to the power of story. Don't underestimate the potential of fiction to shape a child's heart as well. I mean, I personally think God is okay with fiction. That may sound strange, but the reason I believe that is because there's actually fiction in the Bible. No, I'm not saying that the Bible is fiction at all, but think about it. How did Jesus illustrate principles when he taught? He told stories, right? He actually used fictional parables to amplify truth in a way that would inspire those who listened. Did you know that research actually indicates the more fictional stories you read to a child over time, the greater their empathy? Why? Because stories have the potential to make you feel what someone else feels. Stories over time can collectively work to build a child's emotional, relational, and moral intelligence. Just think about what happens when a child imagines fighting Smaug the dragon with Bilbo on the Lonely Mountain, or joining Anne-Marie in the Danish resistance during World War II, or traveling with Lucy through a mysterious wardrobe into a frozen land. They just see more. They care more. They hope more. That's what imagination does. It affects our emotions. It affects our intuition. And imagination can also hold a key to how our faith develops. Have you ever considered that maybe God gave us our imaginations so that we could imagine things about Him that we have never seen or cannot see? This is so important. This is why you should foster the imagination within a child. It helps them see beyond themselves. It helps them embrace complex truths. It helps them envision realities related to the ancient stories of faith. You need to encourage a child's imagination if you ever want them to be able to imagine the power of what happened when God created the world, or to imagine the voice of God to Moses from a burning bush, or to imagine the miracles that Jesus performed as he traveled through the ancient cities, or to imagine the majesty of a heavenly dwelling place. You see, don't miss this. God gave us an imagination so we could imagine the unimaginable. And stories are the spark that ignite our creative senses and emotions. Stories move us, and stories have the potential to stretch our perspectives about a very big God. By the way, this is the reason that Jesus was such a master at spinning parables to teach people about the character of God. He was God. So you can imagine the creator of the cerebrum, the very one who fashioned your imagination to connect to story, crafting a story to actually tell you. I mean, I know that kind of gives him an advantage over the average storyteller, but maybe that's why his stories were so timeless and so powerful and so life-changing. Jesus appealed to the imagination and invited us into the action. The point is, as leaders and parents, we would be smart to do the same, because the stories you tell matter, and you're inviting kids and teenagers into a bigger narrative, one where they have been designed to play a very significant role. Why do you think Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, or Frodo in Lord of the Rings, or Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, and a boy named Harry have such an appeal to the hearts of kids? I'll tell you why. Because they remind us of the struggle between good and evil, the existence of a supernatural and miraculous power, the potential to be personally restored and transformed. And why do you think the same themes seem to be recycled so many times in movies and classic books? Well, maybe it's simply because the idea of story originated with God, and if every story was written by an author who was created in the image of God, then it makes sense that their stories are in some ways a reflection of God's story. It's just no wonder that stories over time inspire and shape us. It's no wonder that stories incite faith. It's no wonder that stories give us hope. And if you want kids and teenagers to have a perspective about this world, if you want their personal story to connect to a bigger story where God is the author, then as a parent or leader, create a storytelling or story reading culture in your home and church. A bigger story perspective prepares them. It prepares them for whatever happens. It compels them to take risks. It incites them to do something significant. And a bigger story perspective moves them to keep believing that good will ultimately win. That's why everybody loves a good story. You latch on to someone who's going against the odds. You identify with their struggle to push through. Did you know the script for Harry Potter was written during J.K. Rowling's darkest hour? Here's how she describes the time in her life. An exceptionally short-lived marriage had imploded and I was jobless, a lone parent, and as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. I was the biggest failure I knew. I was set free because my greatest fear had been realized, and I was still alive, and I still had a daughter whom I adored, and I had an old typewriter and a big idea. And so rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. So Rowling captured the imagination of a generation with a story. The story of a boy named Harry, an unusual boy marked for a specific destiny from birth. As he discovered his true identity and embraced his purpose, he grew in wisdom and strength. His closest friends followed him everywhere, facing grave opposition, but they could not always understand what he understood. They could not follow him into the very final battle against an evil enemy where he entered into death itself and defeated it. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Regardless of what you think about Harry, you have to agree, stories are powerful, especially when they reflect God's story. So playing for keeps means you get serious about giving kids stories over time. It means you look for opportunities to amplify the story every week. Because when you amplify the story, that means you do whatever you can to find more stories to inspire your kids and your teenagers that you're responsible for. Because as parents and leaders, when you amplify the story, you're giving them a bigger story perspective. So read them, watch them, tell them, create them, write them, illustrate them, film them, live them, collect them. Stories over time will give kids and teenagers a richer history. Stories over time will transform their perspective. Stories over time will make their life fuller, their faith deeper, and their hope stronger. Stories over time will move them to imagine a world beyond themselves.